Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. Reports emerging today that Daniel Ricciardo's return to the Formula 1 grid may be happening sooner rather than later. Rumours emerging that suggest that a potential move to Alpha Tauri could be possible if he doesn't get the Red Bull seat if Perez continues to underperform. What does this mean for the rest of the Red Bull Junior program? Very much interested to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. There are plenty of drivers right now under pressure. There's really 4 drivers in that conversation. Lance Stroll, he's one of them. I think it's doubtful that Stroll is going to get the boot from Aston Martin just because they're not quite yet at the point to actually challenge for any titles. Alonso will be there to pick up the pieces for potentially and hopefully a race victory at some point this season. Stroll needs to get his act together though, absolutely. And you can say that Lawrence Stroll, his father, should look at the situation and say, well, it's better for business if we bring in a more competent driver. So I think Stroll has to improve somewhat from now to the end of the season to prove that he does at least deserve that seat. I don't expect him to go anywhere. One driver that won't be going anywhere though is Lewis Hamilton. He actually gave an update today on the state of his new contract negotiation they're currently having with Mercedes. It ends his contract at the end of this season, but he's been very clear that he does intend to race for a decent chunk of time, and the contract is making very slow and steady progress. He does say we had a good meeting just recently. Whether that was shortly after Spain, whether that was shortly after Canada, difficult to say. They are very complex contracts. It is not just a simple driving contract, so it's not as clear as just extend Hamilton for another 2 years, but he has made it clear that he wants to race for a decent chunk of time, which definitely implies an additional multi-year deal, probably up until 2025, and then maybe there's an extension possibility there going into the new regulations in 26, and who knows who's going to nail those out of the blocks. One team probably will, as it tends to be, but he definitely plans to participate with Mercedes, and as he says, such a great organisation in partnership for a long time to come with all avenues. So he wants to be effectively an ambassador for Mercedes beyond his driving days, and figuring that out is a bit of a challenge. He also says, I don't have to be in a rush because they're not going to get rid of him, but I'm sure that Mercedes are thinking, well, do we want to spend as much money as this on Hamilton? Can we find a way to negotiate him down? We're paying this guy all this money. He's flying around the world, doing what he wants to do. I know that Toto Wolff recently said, you know, it's not exactly fun for him to have these conversations about money with what is effectively one of his best friends. So I imagine those are the conversations that are currently ongoing. No changes you'd expect from Mercedes next year. We believe they extended George Russell's contract recently, but given the complications in place to come up with a deal that can work for now and for the longer term for Mercedes and Hamilton, it's probably going to be quite a while until we have anything on this. So you guys might have seen this video from Matt and Tommy the other day discussing which are the drivers most under pressure. Lance Stroll we mentioned, Logan Sargent as well to some degree, but you know, he's a rookie, he's brand new. If he can improve over the next few races, I think he has a chance. Outside of that though, maybe Mick Schumacher, maybe alternatives could be in that seat next season. Nyck de Vries I think is the obvious one that's probably going to go. I just don't see what he brings to AlphaTauri right now. He's clearly on his performance levels. He's not even a rookie really, right? He doesn't necessarily have that excuse because he's raced in single-seaters for a long time in Formula E and elsewhere, had some good success, isn't performing in F1, getting outclassed by Yuki Tsunoda week in, week out. So I just don't see, he's also 28. I don't see what he brings to Red Bull going forward. I think he'll be gone. There were even rumours a while ago he was going to be gone mid-season, which I don't think is out of the realms of possibility. We'll discuss with the Ricciardo thing in a second. The other driver, of course, being Sergio Perez himself. We saw the quote from Helmut Marko yesterday that said Perez was only brought in to do a 2 to 3 year job. This will be the end of his 3rd season. So kind of implies that they're certainly looking at alterations there, and Helmut Marko loves the junior program at Red Bull, and they have some good candidates to potentially be the long-term second driver to Max Verstappen. Could that potentially be Daniel Ricciardo? As unlikely as it seems, if there's any driver in the history of Verstappen's teammates that actually has sometimes given him a challenge, Ricciardo has come the closest. They also came together a few times, right? So maybe Red Bull wouldn't want to do it, and maybe Ricciardo's fallen off. Is he washed? We don't really know. He certainly wasn't good at McLaren, but Red Bull still have faith he can be good. They're putting him in the car for a 3-day test after Silverstone to just see what Ricciardo's level is and if he can potentially replace Perez at some point. And even if he's not quite at that level, they might well consider putting him in the AlphaTauri seat, given the fact that Nyck de Vries is I don't think going to be there next season. I just don't think it makes any more sense. And Ricciardo is such a marketable and likable guy that having him around Formula 1 in some aspect will, I'm sure, be beneficial for them as much as he might not be the driver that he once was. So today, Lawrence Barretto comes out with an article for Formula 1 saying that his sources indicate that a potential Ricciardo to AlphaTauri move is a genuine option next year, and he's keen to do it. This is the key point with Daniel Ricciardo, that he doesn't want to go to a backmarker team, and AlphaTauri pretty much is a backmarker team. But if it's part of the Red Bull family, if it gives him a chance to prove himself in that car alongside a solid teammate, then he can actually prove that he's ready to make the step up to the big boys again and drive for Red Bull. So Red Bull are going to evaluate after Silverstone, how good is this guy, right? Is he still washed? Is he back to being at a decent level? Because Ricciardo seemed to thrive in that Red Bull back in his heyday, largely because that car is so good on its brakes. I think it has similar characteristics today, but it feels like when he joined McLaren, we've heard constant issues from them about the brakes and the lack of confidence that Lando has under braking, and that seems to just kill Ricciardo compared to a car with good brakes. So maybe Danny Ric can be back in that case. The question is, though, this really does throw up a massive curveball as to what Red Bull do with their juniors. They've got Liam Lawson, for example. Helmut Marko's got him to go and do Super Formula. He's doing a killer job out there in Japan. So there's a very reasonable chance that when he does that, Helmut Marko, quite often that guy gets a seat in Formula 1 next season, or certainly the season after that. Ayumu Uwasa also doing a very good job right now in Formula 2. Maybe not the absolute standout of this season in F2 so far, but nonetheless a pretty exciting young Japanese driver like Yuki Tsunoda. But if Ricciardo was to come into AlphaTauri for Nyck de Vries, do they keep Yuki there? Does Perez stay in the main Red Bull team? Does Yuki Tsunoda get stepped up to the main Red Bull team, right? Is that his plan in the immediate future? Because definitely they've stuck by Yuki longer than, not exactly that I expected, but sometimes Red Bull might have seen him underperforming a bit in those first couple of years in AlphaTauri and thought, you know what, this guy isn't it, we're going to get rid of him. But they've stuck by him, and now he's doing a great job over there, and I think could very much be a viable counterpart to Verstappen. Now then again, Yuki does still have these, he's not a particularly calm driver, right? Like, he can be a bit explosive, and maybe that's not necessarily what Red Bull need in their seat, and if Ricciardo isn't at the level they need for the Perez seat, then maybe Perez just stays. But if that's true, then does Tsunoda want to be sitting there alongside Ricciardo for a year? I guess he doesn't really have a choice, and if he could destroy Ricciardo like he has to Nyck de Vries, then maybe that'll be a good sign that Tsunoda is ready for the step up. And maybe that's kind of one of the points here, is that Ricciardo can step in and show that if he's actually got it, he can show that against a very solid Yuki Tsunoda. Or for Red Bull, it's like, well, Yuki can prove that he's the real deal by dispatching of Ricciardo. So it's potentially a win-win for Red Bull putting him in that seat. Now, it does slow down the progression of their junior drivers, the Lawsons, the Owasses, but maybe that's a risk worth taking. And Ricciardo, I don't think would want to join a Haas. I don't think would want to join a Williams. But an AlphaTauri with an opportunity to prove that he deserves the Perez seat, which might be available next year, might be available in 2025 when his contract ends, that might be the way to go. Because if Ricciardo wants to get back on the grid, he's got to take opportunities like this, and apparently both Ricciardo and Red Bull are open to this possibility of him joining AlphaTauri. So I think it will depend in some part on how well he does at this test. They've got a tyre test coming up after Silverstone. They're going to do lots of analysis, and Helmut Marko has been quite clear. We are looking at your pace. Are you still, are you any good on track? We've looked at the simulator data. Ricciardo hasn't been apparently so impressive there, but he's been getting better compared to the bad habits that apparently he learned while he was at McLaren. I think this does put the likes of Yuki in an interesting position, though, because he said that at some point he would be open to a move outside Red Bull. Obviously, I want to go to a team that I know based on the last few years that has been consistently high, and if there's no chance at a main Red Bull seat, you'd imagine that he will look as Gasly has, as Albon has, outside of the Red Bull family, right? So I think it would be nice for Yuki to get that chance, but Ricciardo's going to come in there and try and compete for it. But I think this actually could work out quite well for Yuki, because if he does get partnered up with Ricciardo and can do a great job against him, I think he really does improve his stock, given that what we know Ricciardo at least has been in the past. A lot of this will depend though on how the cars perform and how Perez does from now to the end of the season. There's been some rumours from Mike Crack, especially over at Aston Martin, that Red Bull have been somewhat off their optimal pace over the last couple of races, and actually the gap that seems to have closed between Red Bull, Aston, Mercedes actually might be a little bit misleading, and he reckons they're going to show their true strengths again on some of these more high speed circuits. like they were pretty ominous at Spain, for example. So we'll see how close the competition is. But nonetheless, Perez has to improve his performance. His average is 8.8 so far in qualifying position. Verstappen is 3.9. Alonso, Sainz, Hamilton, etc., etc. So Perez to be here is not going to cut it. And that is raising questions about the stability of that Red Bull operation and what they might decide to do over the coming months. Just one final thing to mention as well on Ferrari, because Mercedes seem to believe, on the rumours we heard the other day, that right now the pace standings are as follows. Red Bull are the fastest, Aston are 2/10 behind, Mercedes 3/10 behind, Ferrari 4/10 behind, which is a bit of a generalisation, but that seems to be what Mercedes think. And Ferrari have been fluctuating quite a bit. They were actually quite good in Spain quali, right? Sainz put it P2, apart from Leclerc's issue. Pretty shocking though, in race pace, got destroyed by the Mercedes, but were very competitive in Canada. But Ferrari reckon, and Sainz reckons, that he doesn't expect that to stabilise. I think how a pace in Austria will depend a lot also on the characteristics of the circuit. I think how a pace varies a lot depending on that. We've seen in places like Monaco or Canada, we are stronger than places with higher speed corners like Barcelona, where we struggled more. So I think we'll continue to see variations in our competitiveness. So maybe Ferrari have figured something out, maybe they haven't, but it's certainly a key storyline to keep your eyes on. And just one final thing here from the Liberty Media CEO. You guys might remember a few months ago now, there were rumours that Saudi Arabia had tried to purchase Formula One for $20 billion. And I thought he would have said, it's not for sale. But actually what he says is, it's trading for 17, 18, so why 20? I'd want a hell of a lot more than that. So it's kind of interesting, right, that he's saying, not like it's not for sale, but it is for sale, but for the right price. So maybe that's a little bit concerning, but very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.